morning. Okay, Rebecca, do you want to introduce our guest?
Oh, sure. I can introduce Cassia. It would be a total pleasure. But first of all, I'm Rebecca Tarlow, and I'm part of what's called the Friends of the MST, which is an international solidarity organization that works directly with the MST to both support whatever they're doing in Brazil and to support their political, social struggles in Brazil, but also to have us in the United States know more about the MST and for us to actually learn from the MST struggles and their successes in order to strengthen our own movements here in the United States. So I will put a link into the chat about the Friends of the MST, because if any of you want to be involved, it would be great to have you part of our solidarity network. But with that, it is my pleasure to introduce Cassia, who is the coordinator of the International Relations Collective of the Landless Workers Movement, the CRE. Cassia has been at the forefront of working with Friends of MST networks around the world, helping organize and support international brigades of MST leaders that go abroad. She's been part of articulating a global solidarity network when Lula was arrested and during the recent election. And so she can talk more about the work of the CRE and the work of the MST. But Cassia is just an amazing person, a loving person, and someone whose international solidarity really shines through in her personality. And it's a total pleasure to have her here today, an honor to have her here today talking to you all. So welcome, Cassia. And we look forward to hearing more about the recent elections and success in Brazil and the MST in general. So thank you all.
So is it me now?
Yes.
Yeah. So comrades, thank you very much for inviting the MST to be with you this morning. Thank you, Rebecca, for making the connection between MST and I see I have a problem with ICUJP. So comrades, I was asked to talk a little bit about MST and the current situation in Brazil. So that's how I'm gonna organize my minutes here. I don't want to spend too much time in this first introduction, but because I think it would be great to have more time to dialogue with you. So I will try to be brief. And I'm going to use a PowerPoint presentation to help me with the English and to help you also to follow the presentation. So as I was saying to Carol, France, and Ricky, we've got one of our comrades who teaches at our political education schools. He calls the PowerPoint presentation as the revolutionary karaoke. So I'm going to use my revolutionary karaoke to help me with this presentation. So I'm going to share my screen. Please let me know if you can see.
Yes.
Yeah.
One note for everybody, that Cassie is taking her time this morning while Brazil is playing in the World Cup. So this is valuable time. So please pay attention.
So if you hear some cheering in the streets, and I hope we do hear, is because Brazil scored a goal. And just before I start, I just wanted to remind the ones who don't know the story of the MST, but MST, when it was created as a national movement, one of our main supporters were the liberation theology section of the Catholic Church in Brazil. So we still carry a lot of the liberation theology principles with us. So that's why it's also very important and I'm very honored to be in this space with all of you today. So I'm gonna present in a quite a brief way, a little bit of what is MST for the ones who are not familiar to our movement. So MST, we've been for 38 years now organizing peasants, landless peasants in Brazil with three main objectives. These haven't changed since we were created 38 years ago. The first main objective is the fight for land. So I don't know how, if you know, but Brazil is one of the countries with the highest land concentration in the world. So about more than 52% of all agricultural land in Brazil is in hands of 1% of the Brazilian population. So it's a very high concentration of land ownership. And Brazil as a nation was founded under three main pillars, let's say. The large state, which we call the latifundios, the plantations, monoculture for export, and slave labor. Those are the foundations of what now we understand as Brazil. And those are the foundations of the Brazilian capitalism. So when we talk about democratization of land in Brazil, we are talking about a change in the socioeconomic structure of this country, because that's how this country was founded, and that is how it's based until today. And the main tactic that MST uses in the struggle for land is the occupation of unproductive land for landless families. So we organize landless families to occupy unproductive land and to call the attention of the government to fulfill our constitution. Our 88 constitution, the constitution which was written after the military dictatorship, says that all land in Brazil must fulfill its social function, which means it needs to produce a minimum goal. Sorry, it needs to produce a minimum. It needs to respect labor law, and it needs to respect environmental law. In cases in which the land doesn't fulfill these three conditions, it should be taken by the state and given for agrarian reform. So what we do when we occupy an unproductive land is to call the attention to the government and see, look, this land should be taken and given for agrarian reform. But at the same time, when the families decide to occupy an unproductive land, to claim this land for agrarian reform, they are also confronting the very basic foundation of capitalism, which is private property. Understand that land shouldn't be a merchandise and should be in the hands of those who work on it. So the second goal is the fight for people, what we call people's agrarian reform, which is much broader than only the land redistribution, but it means that when we conquer a land for agrarian reform, we need to work this land in a different way than the agribusiness or the latifundio has worked so far. So it means the transition and consolidation of a production model based on agroecology, the consolidation of new social relations with no exploitation, with no oppression of any kind, and a new model that challenges in practice the exploitative model of the agrobusiness. And the third goal is the struggle for social transformation. We understand that the democratization of the land and the construction of an effective people's agrarian reform is not possible under capitalism. So it must be a part of a broader project for the whole Brazilian society. It's not something only for the peasants. True people's agrarian reform must be part of a broader project that includes all the working class in Brazil. So this is the main objectives of MST. Today we have about 1.5 million organized, 90,000 families are in camps, which are the families that are still struggling for the land. Have I disconnected?
No, I think there's a little bit of buffering that's happening, but no, yeah, I mean, we can edit around this, and I can do some audio magic, so you can go ahead.
Okay, thank you. And then 350,000 families have already won their lands through the struggle of MST. So just to understand a little bit, what we mean by camps. So the camps are when the families occupy the land and start living on that land. But the occupation of private land is illegal in Brazil. So the camps are not recognized by the state as a territory, as a community, right? So that's why we say that the camps are spaces of struggle and resistance, because the families can be evicted at any time by the police or by militias, and they resist in the area, producing, organizing their lives in a collective way until all the due process to make that territory agrarian reform territory. And the settlements is when the whole judicial process that sometimes may take 10 years, sometimes the families live in a camp for more than 10 years. But when this process is done, then the state expropriate the land. That doesn't expropriate, actually. It pays for the land, it buys the land, but it becomes a state land, and the families have the right to use that land. So the agrarian reform land in our settlements, the families do not receive the private title of the land because we are against it. It is state land, it's land of the Brazilian people, but the families can live and as long as they produce the land. Well, just very briefly how we organize. So MST has a very collective way of organizing. So those are photos of the collective of the camps meeting. Every camp, the families are organized in groups of families in which they discuss everything related to the territory. The school need for school, health system, production, security, whatever. So it's all discussed in a collective way. Every family group has one man and one woman that coordinates that group, and the coordination of each family groups together become the coordination of that territory. So everybody in the camps and in the settlements, the whole idea is that everybody must have a specific task, so that people feels really part of the development of that territory and of the struggle. And then in the assemblies, everyone has votes, including the children, and we have from the territories to the national level, what we call the sectors and collective, that are groups of people that organize specific needs of the struggle. So health sector, human rights, gender, education, culture, communication, political education, finance, production and environment, youth, international relations, LGBT, And this way of organizing is what we call organicidade. There is no word in English for that, but it must reflect what our organizational principles, which are always collective leadership. So we don't have one person, we don't have presidents. We have a national board that is composed by 90 people, representatives from every state where MST is organized, always a man and a woman, and representatives of every collective and sector. The second principle is division of task, planning, discipline, and respect for collective decision, criticism and self-criticism, study, and always the ongoing connection with the base, which is like grassroots work. So our national board, our national coordination are people who are living in the settlements, living in the camps. They have their connection, straight connection with our social base. Very briefly, just an overview of the MST. We can answer questions later if you have, but then I would like to speak very briefly as well about Brazil now and the elections. So comrades, to talk a little bit about what happened in Brazil during this last election, we need to look at the emergency of the extreme right in Brazil. And that started consolidating itself in 2015, when there was a strong process of criminalization of the Labor Party and the left by the media and the judiciary system. So 2015, you remember we had the first PT government in Brazil in 2002, right? So there were like 12 years of PT government. In 2015, the bourgeoisie said, no more, don't want these guys anymore. We want to regain full control of the state. And there was a very, very strong criminalization process that we see the consequence of this process until now. This process led to the parliamentary coup in 2016 that overthrew President Dilma. And in 2017, it led to Lula's imprisonment, basically for him not to be allowed to be the candidate of the 2018 election. And Bolsonaro wins 2018 election without Lula. And that's also a consequence of the social democracy, or how we call the gourmet right. It's not the extreme right, but it's the economic right, loses space to this extreme right. And then Bolsonaro actually symbolized a much stronger project, which is this neo-fascist ideology. You guys know very well what I'm talking about, because I'm sure that what you've been through with Trump isn't very different from what we lived with Bolsonaro. So as Comrade Carol Francis said, we need to join hands, because this is not only happened in Brazil or in the US. Unfortunately, it has been something that it's getting strained all over the world. So this neo-fascist ideology, which is very much symbolized by hate, individualism, prejudice, intolerance, fundamentalism. We understand as MST, and this is not a Cassia's analysis, it is an analysis that we've been building in a collective way, but it's a consequence of the ideological crisis of the economic right, but it's also a consequence of neoliberalism. The whole process of neoliberalism, which has those as their counter values as well, but also which excluded so many people from the system, like people who has no place in the system anymore, and they start trying to find other ways to be part of something, you know, because they're not part of the economic system anymore. So that's what the 2022 election meant to us. It wasn't only about electing Lula or not. It was really about defeating Bolsonaro, the project that Bolsonaro represents, a neo-fascist, racist, misogynistic, ultra-liberal, authoritarian project, and bring together the project that Lula symbolized, not him as a person, but he symbolized the return to democracy, the respect between people, and a more peoples-based project. So during the election, after the defeat of 2018, even though the left in Brazil were fragmented into three main tactics for the campaign. One group, there was the group of, we already won, don't worry, everything is okay, Lula will be the president. And in our view, this tactic really demobilized the militancy. The second tactic was like, okay, it's not won, but we need to win in the first round. We need to give a very strong message to Bolsonaro. And for that, we can make alliance with whoever is against Bolsonaro. Which for us was also a very dangerous tactic. First, because it's very dangerous when you make such broader alliance, but also because it really showed us that it wasn't effective. We didn't win in the first round, and we did make a lot of broad alliances. And how MST worked during the campaign, we decided that we will focus our work on grassroots work, on organizing people, and that there were some principles that for us were unnegotiable. Sorry for my English. And in that, first, our militants and our people really understood that that was the priority task for us in the first semester of this year. We organized in all over Brazil 7,000 people's committees, which were a space of people's organization during the campaign. And we organized collective brigades to work and debate with people and do grassroots works in all major cities. For us, organizing the people in the people's committees or do with grassroots works meant, first, we needed to win the election, but also we need to have people organized and conscious to defend the government against the attacks of the extreme right. And second, we need people organized to make pressure over this government to guarantee our project, to push this government to the left, because this government is very compromised by the broad alliance that they made. And for the first time in the history of MST, we decided to launch candidates, MST candidates for the parliament, state and national parliament, but with let's say, with the label of MST candidates, even though we are not a party. So we launched 15 candidates and we elected 7, almost 50%, which is more than many political parties elected in Brazil. So for us, Lula's victory was a very strong political and electoral victory. But we do understand that defeating Bolsonaro in the polls does not mean that we have defeated the project that he symbolizes. And it's hard, it's very hard for us to understand how that government, which was a total disaster in all areas possible, when we talk about the setbacks in the achievements of the working class, how it dismantled labor and environmental laws, all this discourse of hate against women and LGBT, indigenous people, Black people, the legitimation of violence in the country, the mismanagement of the pandemic. 600,000 people died in Brazil from lack of vaccines. The return of Brazil to the map of hunger. We have today 33 million people who are facing hunger in Brazil, but still this man had 58 million votes, which means 48% of the votes. If you look at what he did and what he didn't do, you say, it's not possible. How come? And from those 58 million votes, more than 50% of those votes, we know that there were votes from poor working class. There weren't votes from fundamentalists. There weren't votes from crazy Bolsonaro supporters. There were votes from working class who are pressured by the employers to vote, who are pressured by religion. We in Brazil, as you know, we had a lot, the religion, the church played a very big role in defending Bolsonaro. They were manipulated by fake news. But most of all, our understanding is that these people were abandoned by the system. The system cannot offer anything to them anymore. So they look for what they can't get from the system in other places. And they get angry and they get more prejudicious. You know what is the white poor working class in the US with Trump. Well, so even though Lula says there is only one Brazil, we do know that we live in a very divided country today. It's very polarized. We cannot talk about the people who voted in Bolsonaro as just as crazy people. No, they are working class, and we need to have something to offer to them. In this sense, we have presented to Lula an emergency plan, which was built with many people's movements in Brazil. And there are four main issues that we say to Lula that he needs to deal with it in the first 100 days of his new government. The first one is to tackle hunger. 33 million people facing hunger in Brazil is something that is not acceptable. The second, tackling unemployment. Third, reorganize investment in social issues such as housing, education, health. And fourth, he needs to reverse the setbacks of Bolsonaro's government, such as the labor and environmental law. But for that, he needs money. And yesterday, there was the first victory of Lula's government, even though it's not in the government yet, but we got the approval in the Senate of the amendment to the Constitution to overthrow what we call spending ceiling, which was implemented by Bolsonaro, and which in the Constitution said that the government had a very low limit of spending in social areas. And we were able to overthrow this limit yesterday in the Senate. It still has to go to the Congress, but it's a first victory. some of our specific demands, MST. We want, first, we need to set all the 90,000 families who are still living in camps and waiting for the government to finalize the process of agrarian reform in their territory. We want zero deforestation, and we want a national program of reforestation of the country. And we are proposing the government a new ministry, which is, we gave the name of Ministry of Land, Water and Food. We are also saying to Lula and people close to him that this time Lula cannot make the same mistakes he made in his two first governments, and he needs to govern with the people and not for the people, which means build mechanisms for people's participation, raise the consciousness of the masses. And our MST main tasks in the next period will be keep organizing the mass struggle, people's mobilization and pressure, so that this can be really a government with the people and not for the people. How long did I take? Half an hour. Thank you, comrades. This is for us just to start some provocation to start our discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Carol Francis, I don't know if you wanted to, there are a couple hands up and stuff, but you're on mute.
I'm unmuting. Yeah, I was just about to call for questions and answers, but I want to say, I love the flag on your wall right next to you. And here's my question to start off. I also heard, I mean, really interesting that Bolsonaro got a lot of working class people's vote, because people vote against their own interests when they're lied to, and especially when the church tells them that the devil is the alternative. But I also have read that there were roadblocks that Bolsonaro's people set up to keep people from making it impossible for them to vote. And I'm wondering if was that often the case, or Cassia?
Shall we take some questions and I answer by block, or
well,
how do you prefer?
Okay, we can do it that way. ICUJP Zoom host, that would be Rick.
That'd be me. Thank you very much for this. This was very enlightening. There was one slide that you showed, actually two of them. I think one was the problems of the Bolsonaro government and how they completely failed. And I felt like if you take that name Bolsonaro and you switch it with somebody that we know of that has suspiciously funny looking hair that was our president for a little while, you would have the exact same criticisms, right? So that's one thing that struck me. The other thing was with a parliamentary government. We're not familiar with actual democracy in this country, but you have a parliamentary government that Lula has to put together this coalition. How do you guys see the coalition of this government? Do you think it's going to be he's going to be able to draw on more progressive parties and constituents, or is it going to be something that he's going to have to make more maybe center left than what it was his first two governments? But thank you. This was awesome.
Right. Michael?
Yes, thank you. A tremendously enlightening presentation, and thank you for that explanation of the role of the MST in the election and post-election, and having your own set of proposals and actions. I wanted to share that I was a part of a group here that brought up a young comrade from the MST a few years ago, and hi, Rebecca, when there was an effort to do some social investigation of the movement in the United States, and we brought him up, and he worked with what used to be Acorn, ACE here, and the health, the Hotel and Restaurant Employees Union, Unite here. And one of the things that impressed me a tremendous amount was he had grown up in one of the settlements and had been educated. And if you could speak a little bit more about the whole process you have of running your own schools right up to the level of professional, red experts, so to speak, who are accountable to the people. I think that's a really fascinating aspect of your work. And then I was hoping maybe Rebecca at some point could say more. I got on a little bit late, I'm not sure, about the MST, the Friends of the MST in the United States, and what people can do in solidarity in this country. And the last question, I'm sorry to have so many, but in the United States, the neo-fascist project is a very blatantly and totally a racist project, anti-migrant, anti-Black. And I'm wondering, because Brazil is certainly a very multiracial society and has a lot of that same history of enslavement of African people, how that plays out in Brazil and in your work. Thank you.
Okay, Cassia. That's a few from Michael and a few from others.
Okay. So, well, first question about the roadblocks. See, most of the roadblocks, actually, the roadblocks during the election, during the polls, wasn't by the Bolsonaro supporters, but by the police, actually. The federal police was the one who started stopping buses and blocking people especially in the Northeast, where Lula had a very, very strong vote. But even though we don't believe that it made such a difference, people could move around. And I mean, the ones who are really not being able to vote because of the blocks weren't so many to make a difference in the results. Parliament. We have a very conservative parliament, but it's part of the whole bourgeois system of how the parliament is elected. So we are quite worried if this parliament, which is very, very conservative, will allow more structural change by the government. We have two things that may change it. Well, one, we were surprised that it approved this amendment to the Constitution even before the government Lula's government started. Second, the only way to make this parliament to allow Lula's government to do the change that they need to do is by people's mobilization. And that's why for us, it's so important that those 7,000 people's committees that we organized during the election are in place and are really strong to make the pressure and the mobilization that they need to make to help Lula go more to the left. Without the people organized, this government will be even worse than the two first Lula's government. Yeah, did I forget something? And I think then later Rebecca can talk more about or do you want to talk now, Rebecca?
I can talk.
I'm sorry, if you could say something about
Oh.
Could you say something about the question of race and racism? That's what I asked about.
Yeah, true, sorry. No, Bolsonaro's government is the neo-fascist ideology symbolized by Bolsonaro's government is really, really, really racist. Bolsonaro even said on TV that Afro-Brazilian rural communities that we call quilombolas, that they didn't, their value was less than some kilos of, how do you say that? Of meat, as they used to say during the slavery. So, and that's also the case with women and LGBT. That's why the violence in Brazil increased so much against. Brazil is one of the countries that has the highest level of assassination of women. How do you say feminicídio, Rebecca?
Femicide.
Femicide.
Yeah. In Latin America, for example. So, and that has increased a lot during Bolsonaro's government because of the racist policies that he implemented. And also, like, he was always, by his own speeches, he was giving the message to people that it's all right to be racist. It's all right to be misogynistic. It's all right to carry a gun and kill people if you don't like them, you know. Yeah.
Well, okay, Steve.
Thank you. Cassia, what a wonderful presentation. And thank you for taking all the time to put the PowerPoint together and to help us understand the struggles that you're involved in. A quick kind of a two-part question. I'd like you to expand on how MST decided to run 15 candidates in your election.
Yeah.
We have a constant debate in America about movements being outside the government, not compromising in electoral politics, and we grapple with that all the time. So I'm very interested in how MST analyzed that, how you decided to enter into electoral politics, how you chose the races that you ran in, and the nature of the 7 offices you did win, and how much does that give MST any clout in your parliament to play a role in the new government? I'll just hold that question. I'll come back around another time if there's more time later. Thank you.
Okay, Fernando.
Yes, first of all, I'd like to congratulate the Brazilian people. It's really tremendous work. This is not, this is not the first time. This is his second time, only to be cheated by the right wing, And I think the American people need to learn more about what's happening in the third world, or at least to like like Central America and other countries, because they're really doing a lot of contribution, and we cannot even here in the U.S. we cannot even release our political prisoner. We have a lot of people in like the Black Panther and other progressive organization that's incarcerated. We have tremendous problem here, and I think we should learn more. But I do agree that that at least the 3 or 4 points that you have to do as a Brazilian people. I really support that. That's that's a good way of really exposing the right wing, because what's the right wing is really a dangerous organization. It comes from the United States and so forth, and it's really affecting the Brazilian people. The same thing what's happening in our country, like the Philippines, for example. And again, we should really support, we should learn as a people here in the US. I forgot what I'm going to say, the the fourth part, but let me just leave it there for now because I forgot. Thank you.
And Michael, you had one thing to add? Or did you just?
I wanted to ask again about the internal educational system, because it was really, really impressive that you train up your own engineers, your own lawyers, your own doctors, and I think people need to understand just how comprehensive your effort is of what we call sort of prefigurative, that you're creating the society that you want to live in the future right now. And if you could say a little bit more about that, I think it's really important for people to understand.
If I can say something really quick before you start, Michael Novick was very instrumental in bringing us into contact with Rebecca, who brought us into contact with Cassia. So I wanted to thank Michael for, I know he's working 26 hours a day at KPFK, and thank you for doing that.
And can I say, please take your hand down once you've spoken so that I don't think you're raising your hand again. Cassia?
Yeah. Thank you very much, comrades. I don't think I'm going to have answer for everything you asked, because those are very important and difficult questions, but at least we can try to build some tips together. So I think the first thing is how MST decided to run 15 candidates. See, that was after a very, very long debate, internal debate, and it wasn't easy to take this decision. During our 38 years, it's not that MST always got involved in the elections in terms of trying to politicize the process of the election, doing grassroots work during campaigns and so on. But we were always like very resistant to really join the election the way that we did this year, because of exactly what you guys said in your question, like how can we keep our political autonomy if we have parliamentarians and so on. So that was a debate that we had to mature, this debate during since 2018, after Bolsonaro's election. We've been discussing, see, now it's not the same as before. I mean, we are talking about something very big. How can we really, we need to do more, right? And since 2018, because we had no economic victory in agrarian reform, and because of the political situation, the truth is that during the last 5 years, MST focused much more in the political struggle than in the economic struggle. Not because we wanted, but because the situation just like, obliged us to. And that also not because we wanted, but because of the situation, that also made MST to become a reference in the left in Brazil. And becoming this kind of reference brought with itself a lot of responsibility, that we cannot just say, okay, but we don't want it. We just want to go until there. We don't want to cross this line, or, So all those together made us start this debate in 2019, 18. And then last year, we decided that, okay, we are going to launch candidates with our name, but they cannot be from our national board. They cannot be someone too public from the MST. They have to be people that we trust enough to give the political direction to their legislation. So that's how we chose those 15 people, right? some of them are not even in the, they are sons and daughters of MST leaders. Rebecca knows very well Karina. We know her from when she was a child, and now she is a parliamentarian in Pernambuco. Can you believe that? And we chose people that could really represent the most oppressed in Brazil. So one of our candidates, also from Pernambuco, my state, and where Rebecca also lived for a while, is Erivan. He is a Black, gay, and drag landless. He was one of the candidates. Rosa, who is also from Pernambuco, she is a Black, gay woman. So we try to, like get people that really represents the most oppressed people in Brazil. And I think I have to say, I myself, as a member of the National Board, I participated in the whole discussion, but I was still very concerned. And I was like, okay, we cannot be co-opted by the party way of doing things, And during the process of the campaign, and I participated in the campaign, I found out that instead of us being co-opted by the party way of doing things, we could just like imprint our way of doing things in the campaign. So it was the broadest grassroots work we have ever done in those 38 years of, we went to all the slums, we went to all the favelas, we spoke to people, we politicized the election. And I think only for doing that, if you can leave this heritage to the left parties in Brazil of doing campaign in a different way, it's not only votes. And that's what we always said. For us, it's not the electoral victory that matters, it's the political victory. We need to leave this process with more people organized, with more people participating, and I have no doubt, comrades, there was a very good political decision and a very big political victory to have those 15 campaigns in place. Sorry, I think I got too passionate now. I spoke too much. And our educational system, Rebecca is she's an expert on our educational system, but just to say, the first thing that we build when we occupy a land is the security place for the people who has to, the school, and the health place. So those are the first things that we build in any occupied land. We started at the beginning of MST, we started with a big project of eradicate illiteracy, because peasants in Brazil, we had a very high level of illiteracy in our social base. So we started organizing groups and campaigns, and we had this big campaign that, like for years, which was like build territories free of illiteracy. And then we started, we always discussed education as a public, a state task. We don't want to like found our own schools, which are like apart from society. We want the whole society of Brazil to have quality and free state education for all. And we started doing this struggle with the state. How can we build what we call education for the countryside and with the countryside? And during Lula's government, he implemented a policy which is called PRONERA, Programa National Program of Education in the Agrarian Reform Territories. So PRONERA helped us to make partnership with universities to have specific university courses for the beneficiaries of agrarian reform. So that's how we can form now our engineers, our teachers, and all the curriculum is discussed between MST and the universities in partnership. Yeah, Rebecca, you wanna complement?
Oh, yeah. I mean, what the MST has done with education just really shows how it's very possible for a social movement to co-govern state institutions, and that's not going to lead to their demobilization or decline, but in fact, by co-governing institutions like schools, the MST has been able to increase its strength and internal capacity over the past 40 years. I mean, the movement started off as a movement of, folks with at most, high school education, but usually middle school education. And now it's a movement of PhDs and master's students and doctors and lawyers. They have more than 3,000 schools throughout the country in their settlement that they co-govern. They've trained more than, I think, 3,000 teachers who are activists working in their schools. They have this program that Cassia mentioned, Pronera, which partners with over 80 universities across the country to run what would be called it's almost like a geographical affirmative action, where only folks from areas of agrarian reform can go to these programs, which are bachelor degree programs for 4 years, where they become, lawyers and doctors and pedagogues. But they're run by an alternative educational approach, where it's completely collective, where students from the countryside go for 2 months and study and then go back to their communities to implement that in practice, called the pedagogy of alternation. It's sort of what Michael Novick said. They're taking their social and political values and they're prefiguring that within the educational realm. And so the way in which the MST has occupied not only land, but the public school system, in my mind, is one of the most amazing things about the landless workers movement. I can put a link to my book that is in English that talks all about sort of the history of the movement's attempt to transform school systems. That's interesting to folks. Yeah.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Wow.
And maybe could I use this moment to talk just a little bit about the Friends of the MST in case people want to get involved? Just the Friends of the MST is the MST's official solidarity organization in the United States. We're in constant contact with Cassia about what the MST needs. For example, during Bolsonaro's government, there was going to be a huge eviction of folks throughout the country in camps and in houses. We helped to run an anti-eviction campaign. So we got letters and phone calls and Twitter bombs to sort of get people to extend an eviction moratorium 2 or 3 times. So that's sort of an example of when the MST needs something, they sort of contact us and we try to support through our international connections. But also the Friends of the MST realizes that the MST is often more advanced or more they have experiences that our own social movements can learn from. And so what we try to do is really promote lessons that we've learned with the MST here in the United States to increase our grassroots struggles here in the US. Michael Novak mentioned an exchange where there was a comrade from the MST in Los Angeles for 6 months, and he worked with 4 different organizations to get to know the struggle and share about the MST. And so the Friends of the MST really does both do solidarity with the MST when needed, but also kind of bring the MST's energy to the United States and to US social movements. And whenever I ask the MST personally, like, what can we do to support your struggle? The answer is always change the United States and make the United States a more progressive place. So that's what our role is in supporting the MST. Yeah, I'm going to put the link to the website for the Friends of the MST, and feel free to contact me if you want to be more involved in our network.
Wow. That is so good. Cassia, one other thing, I noticed a flag on your wall. Do you have students in Elam studying medicine in Cuba?
Right now, no, we have formed more than 100 doctors in Elam, Cuba. Now
Wow.
we have a group in Elam, Venezuela, and probably next year we are going to have another group in Elam, Cuba. So
Wow.
yeah.
That's how many that you have?
We have today we have more than 200 doctors that we formed in both Elam, Cuba and Venezuela.
Wow, that's great. That's really good. And one other thing, could you say slowly movimento and what MST stands for? It's right behind your head. The flag.
MST, Movimento dos Trabalhadores Rurais Sem Terra.
Thank you. Yes, Fernando.
Yes, I remember my question now. But anyhow, what the Brazilian people can share to us here in the U.S. because we have a tremendous problem here in the U.S. Maybe you can share some input that we could learn from you, because you know, it looked like you know, the people here are, you know, though we're so oppressed by the right wing, but I think you know, like Central America is turning left, and you know, part of that area is really turning left, and maybe we can really learn. Could you please share that thought for us? Thank you.
Is it the last question, Carol? Can I answer?
Yeah, go ahead.
There is Steve as well.
Well, Steve, did you have an announcement or did you have another?
Oh, I'm
question?
sorry. I forgot that Cassia is gathering up the questions. So very quickly, first of all, Rebecca,
Okay.
ICUJP is now Friends of MST. So please think of us when you are looking for coalitional support. We are ourselves a coalition of many congregations and organizations. We've made a bond today with you and MST. So please look out for us when you want that kind of support and activism. Cassia, my second question is, what are the warning signs with Lula? What are you most concerned about? Is he going to be pulled to the right? How much of his party controls your parliament, and how much does his coalition put pressure on him to abandon or undermine the platforms that he ran on, to your disappointment? What should you and we be watching for that Lula may not live out the promises you're hoping for?
Thank you, comrades. Well, Fernando, I think your question is very difficult. I don't think we have too much to teach the Brazilian people. I think we have faced the many, I mean, very similar problems as the people in the US. I think we need to learn together, and I think we need to work together to overcome the extreme right that, as I said, is also very entrenched in a big part of the poor working class in Brazil. So, and I think what this group, what you are doing, like to work within faith-based organizations, to work within the church, this is one of the most important things. And that's something that we in Brazil have to learn from you, actually. And I think political education, comrades, we need to work on political education. We need to work with our own class, the working class. So we need to stop like just saying, working class who voted for Bolsonaro or who voted for the other unnamed one in the US, they are like crazy or they are stupid. No, they're our class. And there is something that we need to offer to them, you know. If they are not with us, it's because we are not with them, you know, and I think this is something that we need to learn together. And Steve, Lula, see, the left coalition has almost the same number of members in the parliament as Bolsonaro's coalition, right? And between those two, there is the economic right, which is with Lula, but they are so fragile now. And also we will have to count much more on our left parliamentarians. I don't think they have this too much strength to push Lula's government to the right. That's one thing. The second thing, I think Lula learned a lot after his more than almost 2 years imprisoned. And he learned a lot who is besides him and who is not, you know, truly besides him. And the third one is, I was quite impressed. He has announced today, he has announced the first 5 ministers of his government. All 5 are from very left background. So, and that includes, yes, I was very impressed actually, because that includes the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Minister of Finance, the Minister of Armed Force, Security, I don't know how it's called in English. So very strategic areas he has announced today, and they are very, very good people who has been nominated. So we hope, we have a lot of hope, but we do know if we don't do our task, which is keep pressuring, keep organizing the people, keep fighting, keep struggling. I mean, and make people understand that going to the streets doesn't mean to be against Lula's government. On the opposite, we are with him and we want to govern with him. But for him to be able to do what he needs to do, he needs the people putting pressure on this side of the more conservative alliance with him. And to finalize, because I know that our time is over, I just would like to ask all of you that I think we have 3 tasks as internationalists that we need to work on in the next period. One, someone put in the chat, is Assange. I mean, we need to put more pressure so that we need to free Assange and what represents having Assange imprisoned. Second, we cannot allow Haiti to be invaded again. And that's our task, comrades. We need to organize international campaigns. We need to organize whatever is needed, but we cannot allow Haiti to be
invaded again.
Third one, Palestine. I mean, what's happening in Palestine and nobody's talking about it. You know, if it's the only thing happening in the world is the Ukraine war? No, Palestinians are dying every day and we need to make the world listen to it again. And fourth, our dear Cuba, please, we need to lift the blockade. So I think those are the 4 tasks that we as internationalists we need to work in the next period. And I really thank you guys for inviting me, and it was a pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you so much. That was, remember those 5 tasks, supporting the MSM. Haiti, Assange,
Palestine,
Cuba, and Palestine.
Cuba, and Assange.
Everything after my heart. Okay, announcements. December 10th, this Saturday, which is tomorrow, ICUJP is a co-sponsor of an event for freeing Assange on International Day of Human Rights. And it will be at I just put the info in the chat at All Power Bookstore at 3:00. Medea speaking on her book about the Ukraine at 4:00, and we're just going to go and say free Assange. It's going to be a small event because we're just reorganizing the group, and you know, we were given this date that there are going to be activities for Assange across many cities. And so we'd love to have you there. Any other announcements? Okay, then go into our closing circle.
Sorry, this is Michael. I had a hard time muting. I put in the chat. Actually, there's a whole bunch of stuff happening on Saturday, 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. There's a benefit for Dr. Matulu Shakur. Fernando mentioned Black Panthers who have been in prison. He's actually being released from prison and coming here to Los Angeles. And some of his family members and others from the Malcolm X grassroots movement are holding a benefit to deal with some of his medical needs, because he's coming out suffering from stage 4 bone cancer. So that's going to be at Hot and Cool Cafe in Leimert Park, which is on Degnan, near where SON Books used to be. After the Assange event at All Power Books, Medea Benjamin is doing a speaking engagement there on her book about peace in Ukraine. And she'll, following the one at All Power Books, she'll also be at Village Well Books in Culver City, which is not that far away either. And I can't go by without putting in a plug for KPFK. We're in our winter membership drive. And please, if you're not currently a member, become one. If you are a member, consider becoming a sustaining member and making a regular monthly donation. We're in such difficult economic circumstances you can't even imagine, and it's been compounded by a lot of technical problems that have been left over from an effort that was made to work on the phone system. And if you can reach out to the base, which Cassia keeps talking about the base, if you can reach out to the base of the organizations you're in to see if people can become members of KPFK as well, I think that would be great. And the last thing I'll say about that is I would like to repurpose this presentation, Cassie, with your permission. We would edit it and air it on the radio, because there's 20 some odd people here, but we could try to reach millions with that radio signal. I think people really need to understand what's happening in Brazil and the lessons we can learn, as people said. Thank you.
And Michael, I'll as I get it edited, I'll send you the raw video, and then you guys can edit it how you want. Also, we should probably maybe do a little sidebar this week, so we can figure out how we can help KPFK, with social media posts and stuff like that.
Right.
Thank you.
Is there somebody who would like to volunteer to give a closing prayer or words at the end of?
Francis,
Yes.
I'm still on our speaker and closing out. I want to thank you, Cassia. Rebecca had to leave.
Oh.
I have been inclined at this moment in our programs to tell you, and please tell Rebecca, you are now card-carrying members of ICUJP. And if you ever want to wake up and join us at our Friday forums, you have hit so many of the issues in your final call to action that are near and dear to our hearts. It's obvious that we are closely aligned with you. We support what you're doing. And please know that as well. I will add, because we have a few minutes, when you talked about Lula, there's a story that Franklin Delano Roosevelt met in the Oval Office with labor leaders and activists. And he said to them, now go out in the streets and make me do the right thing. Some version of that. So that is exactly the inside-outside strategy that every nation that cares about humanity needs to follow, and you're doing that fully in your country. I want to say to our group that the Assange meeting is very important. The update is now that the 5 major newspapers that published WikiLeaks have called for Assange, the charges under the Espionage Act, to be dropped and to free Assange. And today, or in the last day, a group of 10 or 12 international human rights groups have again called for Assange to be free. So the momentum is on our side on that issue. When you see any of these petitions, please sign them and join in them. I just want to re-emphasize the events that we have coming up, as well as next week's holiday party. Thanks, everybody.